Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time from your day. We know you've got alternative things to do, and we really appreciate you spending time with us over your lunch hour or perhaps a little after that to learn more about entrepreneurism and taking that next step in your career. Really proud and really honored to have an exceptional panel and guests today. So before we get started, I just wanted to share that this webinar is being recorded rather, and there is a chat function. So please interact. Let's make this fun. We'd love to field your questions. We do have some questions in advance. So thank you for those things. But as we're having conversation today, please share your thoughts, ask questions, and we'll do everything we can to get to that in the period of time that we've allocated. So let's make it fun for everybody. Without further ado, I just wanted to introduce our first guest. And Sabrina Wall is she started her career in 2006 as a franchise broker and a franchise owner simultaneously. Since then, she built over 20 franchise locations, which she ran actively and passively. She's also the CEO of Franchise Broker Association and a national franchise trainer. She believes the strategy behind how you go into the franchise matters to your success. She focuses on being clear and bringing clear and truthful guidance to franchise opportunities. Sabrina, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, our pleasure. Also joining us is Jayesh Kasim, who's a co-founder of Valenta BPO. Jayesh started his career as an engineer based in Queensland, Australia. Then he soon decided to follow his passion into the financial services industry. His strong belief that quality and holistic finance advice should be easily accessible to every Australian and small business led him to build and grow several national award-winning franchise services throughout Queensland. During this time, he identified the need and benefit to grow of systems and processes and also outsourcing. As a result, he founded Valenta BPO with the objective of helping businesses create a competitive edge. He's co-founder of Valenta, which is a B2B consulting franchise offering digital transformation, consulting, outsourcing, and learning solutions. Jayesh's focus is on building a strong team of franchise partners globally. He also provides strategic advice to franchise partners to accelerate growth and is always looking for the best solutions for customers, be it RPA, AI, bots, and more. So Jayesh, welcome, and thank you for rising super early to join our webinar today. I know it's very early in the day for you.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. So to get things kicked off, I just thought that, I love the idea and the title of this webinar, and franchising without fear, because it speaks to so many different things emotionally that are going through people's minds. And I think all three of us at some point in our lives have also gone over that mountain of fear and change and really not knowing what was on the other side. So we all have our collective stories, I'm sure, but Sabrina, maybe you're an expert at this. You've done this more than anybody here. So maybe just share in your mind what that means to you and what how you work holistically with your clientele to help them understand and overcome that fear of taking the next step to being business owners.
Sure. Well, I think fear is something that can be completely paralyzing, and it can also be really exciting. And so when people are going through any kind of transition in their life and they're trying to figure out what that next step is, and business ownership, franchise ownership is one of those options, it can be really exciting. It can be nerve-wracking too. And oftentimes people will want to kind of dip their toe in the water. They'll maybe take a baby step or two. They'll try to do things on their own. And they may get kind of led down a path that they hadn't really fully committed to. And when they go through the process, they can often get to the point where it's decision time. It's time to decide what they're going to do. And that fear can be so strong that they actually don't end up acting. And they miss opportunities. They miss those chances to be exceptional. And so what we try to do is we try to help people take the mystery out of the fear and put more clarity around their decision-making process, put more clarity around the information that they're receiving, because we've found that With franchising, it's a bit different than other types of investments because franchising has a franchise disclosure document. And that disclosure document has to, by law, provide the track record and performance of the franchise. Well, if you know what to do and you know how to read that document, you can find out a lot of information about the quality of the franchise system. You can find out what their business model is, what your business model would be as a franchise owner. And because that information is available, it allows you to have the clarity about what you're getting into and what you're purchasing before you buy. And so you can see things like the retention rate of the franchise owners. You can see how well people who have bought before you have succeeded and have they stayed in the system. That kind of information is there and available. And so with franchising, when the individual that's starting and going through that process, when they prepare and they get all the pieces to the puzzle in front of them before they start running forward, when you put all of that together, it gives you a much clearer picture about what the opportunities and challenges are. And when you have a clear picture of what that map is, then it allows you to be a lot more successful once you're a franchise owner. So our whole kind of mission is that we bring clear and truthful guidance to franchise opportunities. And that's the point, is that if you know what the landscape is, if you understand what's going on and how to use those things to your advantage, then you're going to be a lot more successful and a lot more confident with greatly reduced fear in the process. So that's kind of the idea of what we want to instill in people, is that you have the clarity that you need in order to make a good, smart investment.
Wow, great insights. And you can see that education and knowledge is power. You can see that educational side of you coming straight to the forefront. Thank you for that. Jayesh, from a franchisor perspective, you've been a franchisee and a franchisor. How do you help people understand that? Because part of that is knowledge and understanding the business and what's behind it and the people, but also part of that is validation. So when you look at it from your chair as a co-founder of a franchise, what goes through your mind to help overcome fear in the minds of candidates in your perspective?
Sure. And Alan, while obviously, while we're speaking with candidates and so on, it is very important for us to make sure that they understand the model, they're the right fit for the model, and they're going to be successful as well, right? So it's a two-way process. Now, obviously, especially in a B2B, and depending on the phase of life in which the individual is at as well, right? If they have similar background experience, the transition becomes a lot easier, right? And if it is new for them, right? If they're going from a corporate background into retail, it's completely different, and while they've got all the, as Sabrina mentioned, there's all the educational pieces and so on, that becomes very, very important in that process. But if someone's looking at transitioning from a corporate profession into a B2B franchise, that transition should be a lot easier. When they have a look at the documents and so on, it should start resonating with them a lot more as well. And if they understand that straight away, and in 2 to 3 meetings, then I think their fear would automatically be reduced, right? In that regard as well. But and ultimately, right, not everyone is made for business as well, right? And franchising does assist, and it does at least take off about 60 to 70% of all the startup issues and so on, and even ongoing matters, right? Because it's an established model, all the systems are in place. So I think anyone that's looking at a franchise, one of the things that they should be comfortable about or be very confident about is knowing that there are systems and processes in place to help them get started straight away. The ramp-up period, could be anywhere from 1 month to 3 months, depending on the type of business. When I was a franchisee, I pretty much got started within about 2 months, right? I had a few certifications and so on to take, which took me, an additional few months before we opened. But once we opened, it was fairly quick. And, at Valenta as well, with our current model, the onboarding process is about 1 month. So I think it depends on, and again, if the prospects are looking at that, if candidates are looking at, look, what is the lead time before I can get started, before I can start seeing some revenue and so on, I think all those are important factors, which the more they understand upfront, the easier it will be for them to build their business.
So that's really interesting because when similarly speaking, it's education and knowledge, right? It's going down that pathway of discovery, and it's a two-way street, right? It has to be a fit for the franchise candidate as much as it does for the franchise or as well, and making sure that each step of the process, you're revalidating that, right? Does this make sense? Are you being honest with yourself? Is this what you see yourself doing for the next portion of your career, maybe forever? So Sabrina, maybe off of that, how do you work with your candidates? How do you validate that when you're talking to them and you see them maybe going down a pathway that you are uncertain that they would excel in? What type of guidance can you give them to maybe redirect into an area where you think they might end up being more successful?
Well, I think that happens a lot. Oftentimes people will be attracted to a franchise because they were a customer there, or they tried the food or the service and they really liked that experience. And so they say, hey, I want to be a franchisee of that location or that brand. And they don't really understand the complexity that goes into actually aligning with the right system for them. And so what ends up happening is they'll kind of go all the way through the process. Sometimes they'll purchase that franchise and then get into the business and realize, I don't want to be behind a counter, doing, I'm used to an executive position. I don't want to be flipping burgers. And that reality check of what their role is going to be with the business kind of hits them in the face. And that it's really common in our industry. And so we say that, investing your hard-earned money in that way is a terrible way of investing your money, because there's so many different pieces that have to fit together. So what we do is we use really sophisticated tools and science behind our process. And we want to know what kind of culture that person is going to be a good fit for. What are they going to have to do every day? And do those skills actually line up with what their skills are, and that, think of it like an accountant who's like very technical, they're not necessarily going to be the best fit for an outbound sales position. It's the same thing with franchising. If you don't line up the work of the owner with their skills and competencies and desires, then what ends up happening is they don't like it and they don't want to do the work. And then they try to get out of that business because they didn't do the work up front. And then we also look at things like their risk tolerance. Are they wanting a franchise that gives them more freedom and more collaboration with the owners? Or are they wanting something that's very, very strict and extremely well polished, where they're not going to have to do a lot of decision making? It's more follow the process and that's it. So we look at their risk tolerance. We also look at a bunch of other factors too, like how do they communicate with the franchise? What kind of lifestyle do they want? And is the franchise actually going to be the vehicle to get them there? Sometimes people will want to have a transition plan. So I'm going to do this for the next 10 years, and then I want to sell my business and retire. Well, if they're working with a certain type of franchise that doesn't have a good resale value at the end, then it's not going to be a good fit. And so we have to look at a lot of factors, and through that analysis, that's where we come up with, these are the franchises that actually will get you what you want, and where you'll have the best tools and team around you so that you can be exceptional. And that's the only thing people really want. When you're exceptional at a business, it's like the whole world opens up to you. You feel so invigorated every day because you're good at the work and you're succeeding and you're winning. And that's the kind of scenario that we want to create when we're working with candidates. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
That's great. Thank you so much. I mean, we see it in quality of candidates working with, great mentors and coaches, and we welcome that a lot. And we really appreciate all the work that goes in on the front end, so that when we receive candidates, they're mentally prepared for the discussion we're going to have. So Jayesh, let's just say, now that a candidate has gone through the process and really learned about your business model, you know, how another part of the fear in the education is really validating what you're going to do as a company, as a franchise that I'm acquiring, to help ensure my success. So what goes through your mind in terms of making sure that things are there and processes are and training are in place to make the next step and take that person from, really feeling good about a positive decision into, now I'm going to be really successful?
Sure. So, Alan, I suppose in there, there's a lot that goes upfront in terms of planning, right? So during, in our process, one of the things that we like to do is, the very first thing we do is give them a business plan template, right? We talk to them about it. We don't ask them to fill it, but we just talk to them and let them know what it looks like and what it should, what it feels like. And towards the end of the 30 days, that's when we ask them to start completing that document. Once they've understood, they've gone through the initial part of the onboarding, and we understand that this is going to be a live document as well, right? So this is something that we review with them every 3 months. So there's going to be a lot of things, that make a franchise successful. There's a few things that a franchisee needs to do. There's a few things that a franchisor needs to do, right? And it's working together. And everyone's going to have different goals and objectives as well. So it's very important for both the franchisee and franchisor to be aligned in terms of what the franchisee wants to achieve, right? And then the franchisor can design the support that goes around it to make sure that takes place. And constant reviewing and monitoring is important as well. In our model, we have weekly meetings with as a team together with all our franchise partners. So that's very strong. That's very effective. So there's a lot of knowledge sharing that takes place. We have bi-weekly insight series, which is an internal session where we do a deep dive on certain services and certain products, because our services can be applied to any industry out there, right? And any functional area as well. So there is a lot. Usually what tends to happen in our model is, we'll find our franchise partners will work industry or a functional area that the background experience isn't, right? But in learning from other franchise partners and from learning from our insight series and our knowledge experts, they tend to diversify as well into other areas, which is more opportunity. So I think for ongoing success as well, it's important that, in any franchise system, that there is that ongoing team support that's taking place as well, right? Whether it's based on a regional, national level, at whatever level it is.
With Jayesh, you said that you're doing every 3 months you have a meeting with them to go over what their progress is as a franchisee?
Yeah, that's reviewing the business plan itself. So, because a lot of it will go back into activities as well, marketing activities and so on. Now, with a lot of them, especially when it's, when you're doing Google or LinkedIn, Insta, and so on as well, you need to give it some time. So it is important that, we launch activities and then we give it some time, we see the results together and keep coming up with ideas and suggestions, right? My view is that if it works, double the budget on that, and keep doubling it if it's working.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and it's kind of unique to your franchise. Not all franchises do this, and it's, I think, a missed opportunity, because when you are all collectively looking at the individual success of that franchise owner and helping them to say, here's what your plan was, here's how you did, and they know that accountability point is coming up, it's almost like it creates the momentum for them to achieve it, because they're going to have to report on it in a few months or a few weeks or however long left they have. And that process of reporting back and looking at it and making the adjustments, I've seen that when franchisors do that, they tend to have more successful franchise owners than when they kind of let them make their own path, make their own way, so hats off to you for taking that initiative, because it does make a difference in the success of the franchise owners and eliminates fear, right? That's
Yeah,
the point.
Yeah, and because when you're running your own business, right, whether it's a small business, whether it's a startup or in a franchise, it can be, you're by yourself, right? You can, as your business grows, you start building a small team around you and so on, which is great. But I think it's important to be embedded into a bigger structure, right? And then that'll keep the motivation, the fear away, and ensure success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Great discussion. I'll just remind the participants that chat and Q&A is open. So if you have any questions or comments to share, then we welcome those as well. So Sabrina, you've got something that you like to call a window into the mind of a successful franchise owner. Can you maybe share a little bit about your thoughts around that subject?
Sure. So there's a lot of different characteristics and a lot of different types of successful business owners out there. But there are certain characteristics that tend to breed more and more success within a franchise owner. And the common thing that you will hear is that you can follow a system, but I think it goes further than that. Following the system is really important because it's already been proven, the success of the process has been proven, and you want to make sure that you're following that so that you're not doing as much trial and error and then spending the money on all of that trial and error. However, some of the things that happen along the way, you might have a different market, you might have a different set of employees, and things might work a little bit differently. So I think one of the key things that successful franchise owners possess is good communication. If they are able to talk to and communicate with the franchisor, tell them, communicate what's going on, what are the challenges along the way. When they're involved at that level and they're raising their hand for the support and they're going into partnership with the franchisor to help them achieve their goals, that's when we tend to see more successful franchise owners. And this can be people of all different types of personality backgrounds and profiles. But if they're able to not pit themselves against the franchisor when there's a challenge, but rather go towards the franchisor and say, hey, here's what my issue is. How would you advise me to correct this? Or how can we work together? What are some options for me? When they have that level of communication, they are just always so much more successful. Jayesh, you seem like you want to say something to that.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. And then the other things that I would say is you've got to act. A lot of times when somebody is going through this process and researching a franchise as well as starting and launching the franchise, you can get paralysis by analysis. You can start going too deep into the details, and by doing that, you actually slow yourself down. And so what I've seen is when people launch well, it's when they're launching, when they actually take the action, they take a chance on themselves. They say, yes, I'm going to do this and I'm going to figure it out along the way. Because when you're running a business, you have constant and consistent obstacles that come at you. And your number one skill as a business owner is handling, spinning, and turning those obstacles into opportunities. So when an issue comes at you with an employee, your goal is to create an even better relationship with that employee as a result, more clarity about their role, and leave them as a better asset as a result of that interaction. When an issue comes at you from a client, same thing. How can you better educate the client? How can you create an upsell with that? And how can you make this challenge an opportunity? At every level of the business, when these things come at you, a lot of times people will say, they'll get frustrated and they'll say, oh, I just don't want to deal with this. I want it to be easy. But the growth, the real opportunity, the real professionalism, the real money is behind that spin factor. It's behind how well you can transfer and change something from a frustrating obstacle into a beautiful, wonderful opportunity. And that's one of the things that I think, if you're good at that, or if you're willing, not a lot of people are good at it in the beginning. If you're willing to be good at that and you're willing to work at it, you're going to be so incredibly successful. So that's what I would say are some of the skills for successful owners. And it's all about overcoming the fear, right? And take the challenge, spin it, make it something positive, make it something strong, and make it an opportunity for your financial advancement as a result.
Yeah, and I think you're a big SEC person as well, Sabrina. So maybe a little run till tackled, right? Just do it, just go. Awesome, Jayesh. Any perspectives on that subject matter as well from a franchisor point of view?
No, look, I have to agree with Sabrina, right? 100%. If you can be smart about how you spin the situation to your favor, I mean, that is great. If you know that you have a team that can help you with this as well, strategize, I mean, even better, right? Can't ask for more. And, ultimately, it's all about providing solutions, right? Like whether it's a challenge that's for your clients or whether it is a challenge for your internal staff members or whatever it is, right? If one of the things to be successful will be to think about not only how you solve the current issue, but how you create a longer term opportunity as well. You know what I mean? So I think sometimes rather than rushing into it as well, it may be worth coming up with an action plan, reviewing it internally with a few other team members, and then going out, right? I think people would appreciate that as well, knowing that there's been some thought that's been put into it, right? And it's always better to get more heads than one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some of the greatest opportunities were born out of the greatest challenges, right? So just, turn that around and use that to your advantage. Excellent. So maybe we've got time for one more topic before we get into, we've got a couple of things that are coming into chat that I think are mostly directed at you, Jayesh, so far. Maybe just one more thing that we were talking about. Sabrina, you were kind of talking about franchise tricks and how to kind of avoid some of those things. What would you what does that mean to you, and what would your advice be in that subject matter?
So the franchising is regulated, right, by the Federal Trade Commission. And that means the Federal Trade Commission says that if you do these couple of things, then you are considered a franchise and you have to provide this disclosure document. So because the franchise has to do that, then sometimes they'll put certain things in the disclosure document that if you don't know how to catch it or read it, it might look like a positive when it's actually maybe a negative. So a couple things that we have found as kind of bigger issues with franchises are when you see in the disclosure document that the franchise has a lot of terminations and a lot of ceased operations, and then they're reacquiring franchises. So usually what's happening is instead of the franchise taking another hit because they're having a lot of turnover, they'll go out and purchase or reacquire that franchise location. And as a result, it won't show up as a negative on their disclosure document. But that reacquired is a way that franchisors can kind of not look so bad, even if they're going through some serious challenges. So that's an area to look at. Another really important thing to look at is the business model of the franchise. Some franchises are set up to make their franchise owners a long-term customer, and they don't focus on the actual revenue and net profit of the franchisee. That's like the franchise owner that's running the local division. So because they're focused more on, selling new franchises and then selling that new franchisee this package of services, and then they don't retain their franchisees, and then they sell more. So they're more of a kind of a churn and burn type of system. There's a lot of them out there that are that way. And because they are so good at selling, people don't know or recognize that that's what's happening with the franchise. So you have to look at the franchise system's financials to understand what their business model is. So you actually look at their numbers and see how they're making money. And if they're making money mostly on the initial sales and they're making money mostly on the packages that they're selling new franchisees, then they tend to be on the side of focusing where they're incentivized, which is selling more and more and more franchises. And then the second check for that is looking at those terms, terminations and ceased operations to see how quickly people are leaving the system. If they have high numbers there and they're showing really good new sales numbers in the other side, that can definitely be one of the tricks in franchising that it's not always a good thing. Sometimes you can make it work, but sometimes it can be really devastating financially if you're caught in one of those systems. So it's just really important to always work with a franchise attorney. If you have a good franchise broker who actually looks at and understands the franchise disclosure document, then that is really helpful as well. And a franchisor who's going to be open and honest and is going to take you through that disclosure document. Those are all really important steps of the process to make sure that you're not caught in one of those tricks.
Awesome.
Sabrina, can I ask, sorry, Alan, if that's okay.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Sabrina, can I ask, what about, some systems where they may try and do license arrangements instead of a franchise could that be a trick as well? Or what are your thoughts on that? Are there any pros and cons that way?
You have to be really careful with license agreements because the laws are very specific. And a lot of times, if it's just a license agreement and it's not deeming itself as a franchise, oftentimes they're operating as a franchise, but saying they're a license agreement. So you do have to be careful with that. If they're not deeming themselves as a franchise and going through that disclosure process, they are often also a federal business opportunity. And so they have to go through a different set of rules and restrictions for that. So you do have to be careful about how they are defining themselves and make sure that they're defined properly and have the proper disclosures for that. Otherwise, the whole system can be at risk. And if you join it and then the system falls apart, then you also are at risk. So that is something that entity type is one of those things that you would want the franchise attorney to check.
Excellent. Thank you. So Jayesh, we're getting towards the end of the webinar, but I just wanted to hear a response to you from a franchisor perspective to this last topic. I'm sure what goes around in my mind is making sure that you're building the right team, right? And that you're bringing the right partners onto your team, because that will help ensure your success in some of the challenges that Sabrina just outlined. So what do you think about, from the leadership position in terms of, ensuring that we're bringing the right people on to your team?
Yeah, I suppose, it comes back to, identifying the right persona, right? You've got to identify those 5 or 6 characteristics. You've got to use the science, there's Oracle profiles, spot on profiles, and so on as well. Using a lot of that in, checking the candidate's profile, right? Checking if they are the right fit, if they've got the right skills. Ultimately, for any franchise, if they recruit the right team, it's going to be it's going to be a very happy and pleasant situation for everyone, right? Everyone's going to be successful. The franchise partners are not going to need as much time and additional support from the franchisors, which could then let franchisors work on smarter solutions and assisting their franchisees do even better, So it becomes a win-win situation for everyone involved, right? If they've got the right skills. So I think it's important for, one of the things that Sabrina mentioned is, some franchise systems are just about numbers, right? And selling certain packages to their franchisees. In that, obviously the franchise in those kind of situations needs to understand the product or service extremely well, because it's going to be 100% on them, once they're purchased in, right? So I think I think there's a lot in there as well in just making sure there's very strong alignment for ongoing success. I think you don't want to have a churn and burn kind of a system as well. You want to make sure that everyone that's coming is being successful for any franchise system. And it's the same with ours as well. So I think for us right now, we probably decline more candidates and we accept candidates. But that's just making sure that in about 5 and 10 years we have a very, very strong team.
Excellent. Thank you. So just moving to the chat function, I know we're past the bottom of the hour. There's two questions in there. One is, and they're both directed towards you, Jayesh. The first one is a quick one. How do you define franchise territories at Valenta?
Sure. So, in a B2B, and because we're a B2B as well, the way we define our territories is basically only for inbound lead distribution, right? So, in our franchise documents, we would have a territory that has a minimum of 2,000 businesses, and wherein a business has more than 10 employees, right? So that's how we define that, and we use Sales Genie, which is a part of Info USA, to get that information. So that's one, right? Which means we can have multiple in a particular city, right? What that would mean is, let's say, for example, we have 5 in Dallas. When people go to our website and when they find a managing partner and they select Dallas, they would sort of see 5. They can choose one from there, right? Likewise, if they're completing a contact form, when they are completing a contact form on our website or any form on the website, it'll ask them to select their state. When they select Texas or when they select Dallas, it'll again list only the people that are there. So that's what the way that in the territories work for inbound lead distribution. Likewise, when they call our contact center would do the same. Now, for outbound, there is no restriction because we understand that we're in a B2B environment. We could have a franchise partner in Dallas who already has an established relationship with other businesses, let's say in Chicago or in San Francisco and so on and so on. So they should be able to do business there, right? And there's going to be, one of the things that we see in our business is client referrals as well. After the first, 6 to 8 months, once a business has used our service, they like what they're saying, they keep they keep referring clients. So, and those could be outside of the territory, right? Could be in a different country as well, right? And that's fine, So we should be able to, our franchise partners are not restricted in doing business that way.
Great. I think you asked into the third question that just popped up about global as well. So there's no restrictions there. Excellent. All right. So the next question, I think it's the final one so far, is what are the top 3 challenges your franchisees face in the first 90 to 180 days, and how do you help them address these?
Sure. I suppose, the first one is probably technology, right? So it really depends on how technologically advanced the individual is, right? Now, one of the things we make sure during the process is that they have the right IT skill set and so on, because we are, digital transformation business and so on as well. But, with everything being remote these days, with virtual onboarding, just making sure that they're good on technology would help a lot, because we do use a lot of technology products in our business. So that is one, right? The second one is if they do not have a sales and marketing experience or background, then in understanding what goes into a successful marketing plan, I think in understanding, once you design what goes into designing a campaign, what goes into launching it, how long does it take to see results, and how do you tweak that? I think that's important. But once again, we are at a phase in our business where we are only focusing on candidates that have that experience, or have had similar experience in sales or in marketing and business development. So, those challenges, we tend to sort of work our way through it before we even commence, and making sure that it is the right fit. I'd say these are the top 2. I don't really say, and the other one is, I can't really think of a third one right now.
Yeah, I'll just share in the third one. I think a lot of that is that first customer interface, right? And now that I'm prepared, now that I've got inbound lead generation, now that somebody's interested in speaking with me, can you help me with that conversation? And I think there's, that's why we have an area developer model, and we've got oversight to help the franchisee. So I personally sit in meetings. I was in a meeting just prior to this call, and we had a pre-call plan, and we were together for the call, and we had a post-call plan, and just summarized on how to do it, how to create the best experience for the customer, how to follow up with them in a meaningful way, how to present ourselves in the most professional light possible, and how to get that transaction to the next step. So that's one of the things that we do every day, and to support the franchisees, because it's to get those first few customers on board, right? It's critical. You gain confidence. You've got referral network in your system that you've personally managed, and you just start building that fun environment as well. So that's what I would say would be, at least for me, one of the top 3. All right, so I think we're at the conclusion. I think we've answered all the questions to the panelists. Any departing words or any final comments? Sabrina, defer to you.
Well, I would say that franchise ownership is for the courageous people who are meant for more. and are willing to do something about it. And so we hope that that is you.
Really, really well said, Jayesh.
Yeah, look, I'd say that if you want to achieve something, put your mind to it, give it 100% dedication, and get started. Don't defer things, because every day that you're not in business, someone else is taking your market share as well, right? So get onto it real quick.
There's nothing I can say that says anything more than what you two just said. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise today. Look forward to hearing more. I always learn so much from hosting these. So thank you for teaching me also. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you for your questions and thank you for joining us. And we look forward to you joining our next Insider series in a couple of weeks.
Bye. Thank you.
Everybody.